So in terms of outages and reliability, to maximize profit for shareholders, Avangrid, like other investor-owned utility, forgoes maintenance and upgrades on power lines for decades, resulting in dangerous outages. So in 2017, RG&E left tens of thousands of residents stranded and without power in the heart of winter because of their negligence. In that year, in 2018, the following year, New York State fined them for poor power outage management. Furthermore, over the last Christmas holiday, their outage website went down right before a Christmas storm, leading to basically the county executive needing to call the CEO directly to have information that they needed to plan adequately. We've also received story after story of RG&E not repairing downed power lines for several days that are at risk, on falling on people's homes. In terms of COVID shutoffs, to give you an idea of kind of their company mentality, RG&E continued to illegally send shutoff notices throughout the COVID shutoff moratorium, trying to draw out money from people who couldn't afford to pay, and adding to the COVID eviction crisis. The largest issue, as you mentioned, is billing incompetence and basically sometimes billing customers thousands of dollars and insisting they're right until a customer spends weeks on the phone trying to navigate their non-existent customer service. So in fact, New York State Public Service Commission has started and then expanded a full-scale investigation into RG&E and NYSEG, that's also owned by Avangrid in New York State, about these widespread issues that continue without resolution. In terms of jobs, we also know that they have outsourced basically all of their call center and administrative jobs out of the area and transferred many line person and meter reader inspector jobs to contractor based. So they're no longer union, no longer benefit jobs. We've heard about a huge amount of brain drain from the company as experienced people are fired or leave, and that management doesn't seem to prioritize, industry standards in engineering or do preventative maintenance. So on top of this, RG&E reported around $100 million in profits last year, which is up from 89 the year before. And this is particularly a huge and damaging issue in Rochester, because Rochester is one of the highest energy burdened places in the country. So 37% of homes in Rochester pay between 10 and 25% of their income just for energy utilities. And it's 44% for Black and Latino households. So it's a huge, huge burden, combined basically, there's a lot of poverty here, but also RG&E's crushingly high rates, and they want to increase rates by another 20%. Part of that rate increase, and we can talk about that more, is that we pay all of their cost plus a guaranteed rate of profit. And in the rate hike, they want to increase the rate of profit beyond what it already is. So they're incentivized to spend less and less on effective management while charging us more. I do have a number of direct stories from people, and I want to share at least a few of them. If we have more time, I can certainly share more. But for example, from Paul Zito. So we have also a website where these stories are shared, which I can make public to all of you. But Paul Zito says, my bill is up to $500 to $600 a month, and it used to be $100 to $125. I live alone in a 1,300 square foot apartment, and my energy use has not changed drastically. Getting through to any supervisor or RG&E is extremely difficult. And when you can get one on the phone, they blame the customer for not doing the meter readings. I reminded them today that I'm not actually an RG&E employee and that they need to do their meter readings themselves unless they're planning to add me to the payroll. They told me that their policy is to meet their reader once a year. Then perhaps they should bill me once a year. My friends in Fairport, which is a suburb down the road from Rochester, which has a public utility, pay about $60 a month to energize an entire home. How can RG&E justify gouging the entire city of Rochester? They're swimming in profits by massively overcharging us for energy. We have no alternatives available. Public utility is the only way forward. A couple of short ones. Hillary Goldstein says, our story is quite simple. Our bills have gone up threefold. We don't even know why. No one has any answers at Argini. Christina Marie Fiordaliso says, I've been an Argini budget customer on a budget plan for 15 to 20 years. My $97 a month budget plan has recently jumped to about $170 a month in August, then $300 in September and October, most recently $430 for December's bill. No recourse or no answers, just pay or else. I'm a single homeowner. There is no way I'm consuming this much in utilities to warrant this huge jump. One more at least, David Sell says, every month I take pictures of my gas and electric meters and email them in. I rarely read my indecipherable bill, but noticed that the reads on my bill for a couple of months were listed as estimated. I called, and after the usual very long wait time, told that when the guys who input readings from email get behind, they just throw in an estimated reading. I have noticed that as well for the past few months, that the meter reading guy never comes anymore. I have had to call and make an appointment to get actual reads. In one of my calls, I was asked why they haven't been, and the customer service rep said there is no guarantee they will come or not. Probably leave it there, but I'm happy to read a few more if we have time.
Well, I'm so glad that Dr. Wenderlich went first because it gives me the opportunity to say ditto and save us a little time. In Maine, we had a very similar experience, and as you mentioned, and thank you so much for inviting me to this event. I was the House Chair of the Joint Standing Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Technology in the Maine legislature for 6 years up until last June. And so I was responsible for essentially overseeing the Public Utilities Commission here and all of the laws that pertain to our investor-owned utilities. Avangrid, aka Iberdrola, is the owner of Central Maine Power, our largest utility here in Maine. And we experienced very, very similar things to what Michelle just laid out and what they have experienced more recently to us in upstate New York. For Maine, the troubles really began in 2017 with the rollout of a new billing system. And hundreds of thousands of Mainers received erroneous bills. This was documented in a report that finally the PUC decided to look into, but it took many people, writing letters, a lot like Michelle just pointed out, banding together. There was a massive Facebook group that started up with thousands and thousands of people, letters to the editor. I had to go out of business. I was bankrupted by this crazy utility bill that was twice as high as I ever received. My family is showering at the local Y because we can't afford to use electricity in our home anymore. We're terrified of using electricity in our home. These were the kinds of stories. I'm a senior. I'm getting threatening disconnection notices. I need to use my machine to breathe. I've got medications in the fridge. What do I do? Maine, like upstate New York, is rural, is not wealthy. And so many people were really thrown into an incredible state of stress, and there was a lot of harm, I think, as a result of that. So during the winter of 2017, 2018, the summer of 2018, the fall, we were hearing these stories again and again and again. And the PUC finally did decide to look into it, found smoke, and then looked further and found fire. Meanwhile, CMP, again, this Avangrid company, was putting up press conferences saying there's nothing wrong here. We did an internal investigation. Everything is fine. These customers must be mistaken. They were taking out full-page ads in the largest paper in the state, saying that everything was fine. Long story short, the Public Utilities Commission did find that they had completely botched the rollout of their new billing system. They didn't code the system properly. They were cutting corners. They were looking to maximize profits by reducing staff time on this transition, reducing the time to implement, the time to test the transition. And so wouldn't you know it, this complex new billing system, which wasn't the computer's fault, it was the management's fault, was absolutely atrocious. And never before has a fine been issued by our Public Utilities Commission to the extent that it was. Honestly, it was a kind of a slap on the wrist, like price of doing business. It was $10.5 million. And what our PUC said to us on my committee was, well, that's the lowest that we can go. We need to give them a return on equity for all of their equity investments. We need to give them at least 8.25%. So that's the lowest we're comfortable going. And I said, you got to be kidding me. 8.25%, basically guaranteed profit on all of their equity investments is their punishment for this, for putting thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Mainers through all this stress. That's their punishment. And they said, yeah, there's this thing called Hope and Bluefield. There are these, Supreme Court decisions from 80 years ago. And, we just don't feel comfortable going any lower than that because frankly, it's the lowest return on equity that's being allowed by any PUC in the country. So basically the PUC threw up their hands and said, that's the best we can do. And, and they also tried to make it seem like they were really taking action. In some ways they were, but, it was a really massive awakening for a lot of us about, just who wins and who loses in this. 8.25% guaranteed rate of return. Think about that. If you have a savings account right now at your local bank, chances are on average, you're making 0.1% interest, 0.1%, and they get 8.25% as a punishment. So talk to me about how that makes sense. Scottish Power, we should have known that this was coming, by the way, because Scottish Power had the same problem. Iberdrola also owns Scottish Power in Scotland. They're the largest utility there. They own many other companies around the world. They are the second largest electricity company in the world, second only to Nextera. And they own in Brazil, they own in Mexico, they're massive. So Maine is less than 2% of their holdings. I'm not sure their stakeholders or shareholders rather could put us, I'd find us on a map if we asked them to. But here we are, hey, care about us. So anyway, Scottish Power had very similar problems, and there are incredible, heartbreaking stories from Scotland in 2014, 2015, and then there was a penalty. And then again, recently, there have been another rash of problems, which I encourage you to look up and look into. It is just heartbreaking what's going on in Scotland. And there is, not surprisingly, a very significant movement in Scotland and the UK to take back control of their power as well. So I'm looking forward to talk to this conversation tonight. Thank you for having me, Marielle, Lila, everyone else, and let's keep going.